Hello, everyone. Welcome along. It's a new week. It's Betting Weekly WTA show, and we're looking ahead to the big tournament this week over in Dubai. I'm delighted to say joining me is our WTA handicapper. It's Rory Jiwani, who's got me up extremely early. I haven't had a chance to really open my eyes, but he's an early bird, is Rory, and we've got him up. He's got me up nice and early to talk women's tennis. Good morning to you, Rory.
Morning, Nigel. How are you?
Oh, but I could do another 25 to half hour in bed. That's something I could have done with. I haven't had the shave. I don't feel that. I feel absolutely exhausted. But do you know what? It's good to talk tennis. It's good to come back to you and talk a little bit of tennis today. Last week didn't really go to plan. We had a couple of really near misses as two big price semi-finalists in the opening 2 weeks of the year. But last week in Qatar didn't really go to plan for us. Our each-way pick, which I thought was a really good each-way pick. Coco Gauff got beaten in the first round. And obviously, Ostapenko got beat by Azarenka, who seems to always beat Ostapenko 5-0 now, the head-to-head, as we were told after the event by a lot of our subscribers and a lot of our followers on Twitter. Before we move on to this week, which is in Dubai, as we've said, Iga Swiatek, she won her third title, back-to-back titles, successive titles over in Qatar. She had a little bit of question marks about her going into the tournament, obviously after a shock defeat at the Australian Open. She answered them, and she extends her long run as world number one. Arguably, what was, apart from Roland Garros, probably her favourite tournament of the year.
Yeah, I mean, for our picks, Coco Gauff going out first round to Katerina Siniakova was a real shock. I'm not sure what happened there. She hasn't performed that well in the Middle East in recent years, Gauff. So that's maybe one thing to watch this week. Ostapenko, as you said, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of tennis before Ostapenko met Azarenka in the last 16. I still think it was the right play. I mean, Ostapenko was the only player in that half with a chance of stopping Swiatek, in my opinion. And if Azarenka hadn't have got there, if Ostapenko had beaten Azarenka, which it just didn't happen, Azarenka just knows which buttons to press when she plays her. And then, of course, Azarenka was well beaten by Swiatek. She just seems to raise her. If Ostapenko's in the draw, in her part of the draw, she just seems to raise her game, it seems. But yeah, 5-0 now record. What else to take from the tournament? Obviously, there was no Aryna Sabalenka in Doha, but two of the big three made the final. We're backing up last week's Abu Dhabi victory, the run to the final. I would have reservations about her following that up again in Dubai, as she's played more tennis than most this season. We saw last year how she picked up niggling injuries, which blighted her campaign. She was actually 4-1 up in the final yesterday, and then she managed to hurt her leg on the follow-through on a serve with her racket. So she needed a bit of treatment. Then Swiatek came back. Other players to watch, to note from Doha, great to see Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova and Danielle Collins finding form. And Karolina Pliskova, after her victory in Linz, she looks back to something like her best. Her serve isn't quite operating at maximum capacity, but she's winning a lot more games on return than she has in the recent past. So that bodes well for her season. She actually withdrew before meeting Swiatek in the semi-finals, which I think she did last year in Dubai as well. I think she was beaten 6-love by Swiatek once in a previous meeting. But she says it's because of her lower back. She's played, so she went straight from Linz to Abu Dhabi and then to Doha. So she has played a lot of tennis in recent weeks. So that's the excuse she gave, the reason she gave. And I think she might be a little bit doubtful for this tournament. I think she said she was having an MRI scan after withdrawing from that semi-final. But yeah, on to Dubai now when Sabalenka is back.
Yep, Sabalenka is back. Talking of Pliskova, I mean, I opposed her pretty much in every single round, thinking there's no way that she can maintain that performance levels after the win in Romania. But she did, and she cost me lots of money. So she's definitely in room 101 for me at the moment. I put in a Karolina Pliskova well away from any betting for me at the moment in time. Every time I faded her, she put in a great performance. The other take-up for me, I thought Leylah Fernandez played well, and then the US Open champion, deserved a runner-up. Played really well last week, and I thought that was a promising sign. And really, when you look at it, that there is, I know there's this sort of, it's like the Premier League, isn't it? Like soccer league, you've got this top four on the women's tennis who are just a little bit better than everyone else. And then you've got all the others playing for like Europa League places effectively. But the one thing I noticed about Dubai, before we come on to the conditions here in Dubai, if you're looking at the top four, and the top four are all in action, we come on to some odds in a minute. Tournament favourites here, number one seeds, don't do very well. If you go back through the list of previous winners, I mean, Krejcikova won it last year. Ostapenko won it in 2022. Muguruza, Halep's won it a couple of times. Bencic, Svitolina. Usually when I prepare for these shows and I look at the previous winners, you always see the name Iga Swiatek in recent years. You may see Ash Barty pop up. You may, and you're inevitably going to see Serena Williams. You don't see any of them in the winners' enclosure here. Any particular reason why you think that is?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Yeah, as you said, Swiatek's never won Dubai. She was beaten in the final last year by Barbara Krejcikova, who's currently out injured. I mean, going back, I mean, Sara Errani won this tournament in 2016. Not quite sure how that happened. Elina Svitolina won it in 2017 and 2018. Rybakina was actually runner-up to Simona Halep in 2020, way before her Wimbledon 2022 breakthrough. Pliskova reached the final back in 2015 when she lost to Halep. I think one reason, and I was looking at Victoria Azarenka, who's never got past, I think it's never got past the third round here. She hasn't played it many times because I think because it's at the end of the sort of Middle East swing before they head to the United States. A lot of players over the years have actually tended to skip it. So Azarenka hasn't played here very much at all in recent years. I think she was due to be number 2 seed a couple of times and pulled out. It is the one where I think tennis catches up with a few players. There was one tournament, I think it was the Irani one. I did take some notes. In 2016, when Irani won it, it was the first time in WTA or ATP Tour history that all the seeded players lost their opening matches, which is, I don't think it's happened since either. So I think maybe it's because players are tired by this point. They've had a couple of quick tournaments before it, or they're feeling injuries and pulling out. So that could be the reason why there are a few shocks in this one. But yeah, it's a strange one because, as a tournament itself and conditions go, it's pretty similar to Abu Dhabi. It played a fair bit slower than Abu Dhabi and Doha last year. Doha actually didn't play all that quick the week just gone. I don't know. It's just, I guess it's just a build-up of tennis. Obviously, Swiatek didn't play in Abu Dhabi, but she won in Doha. And we know how hard it is to follow up tournament victories. Rybakina did really well to reach the final in Doha, but ultimately couldn't get it done.
Yeah, back-to-back WTA 1000 events is always difficult as well. Obviously, there's a big matches and it waits before, and then they come across here. The conditions will be similar. I would expect the weather conditions will be almost identical, but the results might not be as similar. Whereas one of the two market leaders made the final over in Doha with Rybakina and Iga Swiatek. They're both in action this week. Before we come on to the odds, let's have a look at the bracket. Let's look at the draw. Before we do that, we're going to ask you the conditions. Now, the conditions in Dubai, I've been following it closely because I'm traveling there next week. Not as hot as they usually are this time of year. They had a lot of rain 2 weeks ago, which was making me very, very nervous. But now I've seen people sitting on Jumeirah Beach sunbathing. I think they're a bit more comfortable today with the weather. But a lot of wind around. Conditions. Now, this tournament starts today, Sunday. This is one of the reasons why we're coming on early. It starts on Sunday morning. So we're only going to give you the outright prices. None of the match bet. Head to the Bet Rivers website for the match bets, and obviously if you watch live, you can bet live as well on the Bet Rivers app. So you can bet live and watch the match on the Bet Rivers app. What do you think of the conditions here? Because it is a little bit colder than what it has been in the last few years.
Yeah, I think that may have explained why Doha played reasonably slow. And Dubai, it's going to be a little bit warmer in Dubai than it was in Doha, around sort of 80 Fahrenheit, 27 Celsius most of the week. As you say, it looks like it would be very windy the first couple of days. But with the top 8 seeds getting byes into the second round, as was the case in Abu Dhabi, you'd expect the top players to miss the worst of that. So I remember when I was talking about Rybakina in Abu Dhabi and saying it's going to be windy. She didn't start her campaign, I think, until the Thursday when most of the wind had subsided. So in that respect, yeah, the conditions aren't as warm as perhaps they've been in the past and as we'd expect. So the speed will be a little slower. But I'm sure it will play pretty similar to Doha last week.
Yeah, let's have a look at the draw. And the draw is the most important thing in tennis betting when you're having a little bit of bet on the tournament winner market. And the number one seed is Iga Swiatek, and she's at the top of the bracket. Obviously, the top 8 seeds again in WTA 1000 events always get a bye through to round number 2. So if we look at the seedings, obviously there's some very, very dangerous opponents in those quarters. But if we look at seedings, we're looking at Swiatek v Svitolina. Svitolina's won it twice before here. Kasatkina against Wen Zheng was very disappointing last week. Coco Gauff up against Caroline Garcia. Ostapenka against Ons Jabeur is having all kinds of trouble. That is the top half of the draw. The bottom half of the draw is an out-of-form Sakari against Haddad Maia. Alexandrov against Rybakina. Vondrousova up against Samsonova. And Kudermetova up against Aryna Sabalenka. As I said before on these kind of shows, if only it was as easy as predicting that way that draw is. And the women's game at the moment, I don't think there's much between players ranked 14 and players ranked 44 at the moment. So that is the order of the draw. We'll get Rory to break down where he believes the value in the draw is, but we're going to give you some odds. Obviously, it's a betting show, and the first bit of the puzzle, the market leader shocked me. Sabalenka is favourite. The Australian Open is favourite. She's making a comeback since Melbourne, here in Dubai. Quite a lengthy time to be off a tennis court, and she's gone straight back in at plus 260. Now, a lot of people would think whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. We're going to come on to that in a second. Iga Swiatek, fresh from her triple win, or a third successive win over in Qatar. She's 3-1. Then we have Gauff at plus 550. It was very disappointing, as we said last week. Rybakina at plus 550 as well. So that's that top 4. So 263, 550, and 5. Then we go into the Europa League places. 16-1 for Wen Zheng, 22-1 Ostapenka, 30-1 Samsonova, 33-1 on Jabeur, Svitolina at 35, Azarenka at 40, Kasatkina 50, Pavlyuchenkova plus 50. Then we have who's out there? Sakari 50, Vondrousova 50, Haddad Maia at 50, and finally Fernandez at 50 as well. So they are the outright odds. Before we go into the market in depth, Rory, Sabalenka, tournament favourite, hasn't got a great record here. Number 2 seed, long time off. Is the rest going to do her good, or is she going to come back rusty? I mean, I'm surprised that she's the favourite. Really am.
Yeah, I suspect it's partly down to her draw, which doesn't look the most difficult. She's had a similar build-up to last year. So after winning the Australian Open, she skipped Abu Dhabi and Doha, came back in Dubai. Never got past the quarterfinals here. Last year, she went out in the quarterfinals to Krejcikova, who obviously had that incredible run, beating Sabalenka in the quarterfinals, Pegula in the semis, and then Swiatek in the final. But her draw doesn't look that difficult. It certainly doesn't look as difficult as Swiatek in the top half. Looking at Sabalenka's run, she could face Diana Yastremska, the Australian Open semi-finalist, or Veronika Kudermetova, or Sofia Kenin in the last 16. Then possibly Mira Andreeva, or Pavlyuchenkova, or Samsonova in the quarterfinals. Marketa Vondrousova is the other top 8 seed in that section, but she's struggling at the moment. And then it's Rybakina, Azarenka, or Ekaterina Alexandrova in the semis. As draws go, it's not the worst for Sabalenka. Whereas looking at Swiatek in the top half, she faces Sloane Stephens, probably Sloane Stephens, or Clara Burrell, actually. That's quite an interesting matchup, Stephens-Burrell, in the first round. Swiatek faces the winner. Then Aryna Svitolina probably in round 3, which is very interesting. Of course, Svitolina beat Swiatek at Wimbledon when they last met. And Svitolina, the 2-time winner here. Looking at then Daria Kasatkina, who didn't really play well in Doha, but she had a really tough time in Abu Dhabi, reached the final, played a really grueling semi-final against Beatrice Haddad-Maia. She's recovered now. Or possibly Wen Zheng in the quarterfinals, who I think is underpriced. I think she's a player to oppose. As I said last week, she reached the final of the Australian Open without beating a player ranked in the top 50. Everything fell right for her. Early exit last week. And then probably either Pliskova, Ostapenko, or Gauff in the semis. I said Pliskova. I think I said she won Linz. Of course, she won in Cluj in Romania, the tournament win a couple of weeks ago. Jabeur's also in the second quarter, as you said. She looks totally out of form, and she was in tears in Abu Dhabi during her defeat to Haddad Maia, later saying she had a knee issue. Then she lost her opener in Doha to Lesia Sarenko. It's not looking good for the Tunisian at present, and she admits she's struggling with her fitness. So that second quarter, well, the top half, it looks interesting, and it looks a tough one for Swiatek. I've had a good look at Ostapenko's run. Obviously, we were derailed by Azarenka last week. Azarenka's in the bottom half, thankfully. I think Swiatek could struggle in this top half. As I say, Svitolina in round 3, and then in the semis, possibly Ostapenko in the semis. I think that's a tougher run. It could explain the difference in the price, could explain why Sabalenka's the outright favourite.
Yep, I think you're absolutely right there. I mean, it's definitely a much tougher section in that top half of the draw with some dangerous opponents floating around, including Ostapenko, Henry Gauff as well. And that bottom half does appear to be the weakest part of the section. Just before we go into your pick here, Rory, I mean, we look like if we went to seedings again, you said Swiatek might struggle. We look like we could have Swiatek, Gauff, Rybakina, and Sabalenka as semi-finalists here. It's very likely that one of them, the final, will be contested between those 4. Is there anyone you think this season who can break into that top 4? Or do you think, it's going to be the next person who breaks into the top 5 and potentially Andreeva coming along at the end of the year or maybe next year? But do you think there's anybody here in that lower section that could come out of the pack and challenge the top 4? It's very difficult to put your finger on someone, isn't it, really?
It is. I think you will get the odd tournament where someone has a great run and makes the sort of semis, finals, perhaps even wins it. As far as actually challenging them in sort of rankings and regularly every week, I can't really see it. I think they're just a bit too far ahead at the moment. I mean, looking at the draw, but then you have weird ones like Gauff losing in the first round last week, something I still can't really explain. Siniakova is a capable player, but there's no way Gauff should have lost that. Speaking of Gauff, she's in the second quarter. She could face Pliskova or Caroline Garcia in round 3. Then it's Ostapenko or Jabeur or Paula Badosa in the quarterfinals. Swiatek in the semis. Obviously, we know what happens when they meet. Swiatek usually wins in straight sets. I mean, in this tournament, excuse me, I'm being bothered by my cat. I'm going to have to chuck out of the room. It's a really tricky one because the third quarter doesn't look the most difficult. It looks winnable, especially when you got Rybakina in there, who, as I say, has played a lot of tennis. She could face Azarenka first up. As I say, Azarenka doesn't have a great record in Dubai. Possibly Alexandrova in round 3. And then there are a couple of players who I'm not sure about breaking into the top 4, but could have good runs here. I mean, you're relying on players being out of form. You mentioned Sakkari's out of form. She's in that third quarter. Beatrice Haddad-Maia didn't really turn up in Doha. Again, she had a really grueling semi-final in Abu Dhabi. Emma Navarro had a good time in Doha. She's playing well. She took a set off Rybakina. And there's Leylah Fernandez, who you mentioned, who was up on Rybakina in the first set. They're 2 players, I think, who are quite interesting here, given that Rybakina should be tired, you'd think, after her recent exertions. And I still say there's a question mark over Sabalenka. I get why she's favourite, but she's never got past the quarterfinals here. It's a similar prep. She could be rusty. Her draw doesn't look the most difficult, but how many times have we said that about Gauff last week? Said draw doesn't look the most difficult, and they're upset by someone. We saw Sabalenka lose to Kenin last year. I think it was in Rome, and that seemed to come from nowhere. I think my mind is to oppose both favourites. Obviously, it didn't work last week with Swiatek and Rybakina both making final. But, I think we're better off looking for something at bigger prices here. And as you say, Dubai is a tournament that has seen its fair share of shocks over it.
Yeah, definitely lots of shocks here. And I think the favourites, if you're only going to beat, this is the tournament to get them beat. The favourites doesn't have a very good record here, tournament favourites on the outright market. So looking further down the list, I can see where you're coming from. Are those two players that you've mentioned there, Navarro and who's it? I can't remember who's the other one you said.
Leylah
Leylah
Fernandez.
Fernandez. Are they on your radar for the tournament winner here, or are we going to go elsewhere for our official pick?
Well, my first pick is going to be from the top half, and I'm going to back Ostapenko again. And
Right.
just based on not much has changed since last week. She got through to that last 16. I think she's still in great form. She just came up against Azarenka, who seems to know how to beat her. I've looked at that top half. There don't seem to be any spanners in the work like Azarenka last week. And so I'm still of the opinion that she's in excellent form. So she would be my main pick in the top half at $22.
If you look at her draw, sorry, Roy, she plays a qualifier in round one. I don't know, I probably should know the qualifier by now, but it's still on my draw as a qualifier. She then plays potentially Paula Badosa, who's not having it at all well at the moment. So that's a winnable match for her. And then on Jabeur, and the way on Jabeur's playing at the moment, she'd be, I would oppose her against anybody. So that route will take her through to the quarterfinals where she plays Gauff, who got beat in the first round last week. So that looks a pretty easy route for her to get to the quarterfinals. And she's 22-1. She hasn't really changed much in the betting what she did last week.
No, and she's got a good head-to-head record against Gauff. When she has been in form, she's performed well against Gauff. So I think, you can't really desert her now. She's playing Zhiyu Wang in the first round, the Chinese left-hander. Again, a match she should win. I still think she's the most likely player to beat Swiatek in the top half, as well as Svitolina. Svitolina is interesting. This is her first tournament back from injury after the Australian Open. So my worry is that she isn't fully tuned up. But in the top half, Ostapenko is my pick. In the bottom, as I say,
just before we move on from Ostapenko, Rory, just before we move on, what about the reaction to the defeat against Azarenka? We haven't mentioned that. She refused to shake hands. It's very typical Ostapenko, but that was a little bit silly, wasn't it?
She's a bit stroppy, isn't she? I mean, it's not the first time she's been like that. It's weird because when I saw her playing in Linz, and she seemed a bit more chilled out than previously, but it's always there. It's always under the surface. She is quite temperamental, and I guess she must have been so frustrated because she must have really fancied her chances in Doha, and then Azarenka again. She just does not know how to play her. Thankfully, she won't play her here until perhaps the final. Very unlikely Azarenka will get that far, but hopefully Ostapenko can and earn us some cash.
So we're sticking with Ostapenko in the top half of the draw. She's the one player I think who could potentially challenge the top four if she gets her head right. We know what she's like at clay. She's a former French Open champion. I think if she can get a game going and hopefully gets it going this week, she can challenge the top four and make it a little bit more competitive at the top end of the market. So that's in the top half of the draw. In the bottom half of the draw, which we believe is a little bit weaker, actually. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you have offered for us here in this bottom half.
Well, I'm a little bit scared because I think both of them are in action today. So I don't really want to have the situation. Actually, one of them's in action later today. I'd really like the situation. I don't want a situation where one of them's out before the podcast has gone live. But Leylah Fernandez, I think, is interesting. Showed signs of getting back to her best last week. Bumped into Rybakina, made a good start against Rybakina, and then lost. She's $50. Her draw doesn't look that difficult, and perhaps her main obstacle in that draw is Emma Navarro. Now, I quite like Fernandez. At the prices, Navarro has to be a bet because Navarro's $150. That's just too big. Okay, no matter what your standpoint on the tournament, looking at the draw or anything, Navarro should not be 3 times the price of Leylah Fernandez. Navarro has been in great form in the last few months. As I say, she took a set of Rybakina last week in Doha. I'm tempted to back both, just very small stakes. and the prices allow us to do that. So I'm going to have, this sounds terrible, I'm going to have a quarter of a point each way at Navarro at $150, and I'll have a half a point each way on Leylah Fernandez. I think one of them can get through to the later stages, and then, you know, who knows if Sabalenka gets that far. But it's a tricky one. As we've said, you know, Sabalenka is the favourite. She should get through that bottom half. It doesn't look the most difficult, but this is Dubai. Shocks happen, and she could be a bit rusty. A long break after the Australian Open, as happened last year.
Yeah, this is a tournament for shocks, as we say. That third quarter is pretty weak as well. Sakkari is not in great form. Rebecca is obviously the form horse, but she has a lot of problems with 1 week she can have a real big high, and her fitness levels aren't the same the following week. So she's never 100% when she goes deep in the tournament the week before Rebecca. She's always worth a fading there. So I can see the reasoning for looking to oppose Rebecca. And it's a very hard tournament. 1,000 events back to back is hard for anyone who goes deep. So this could be a tournament of shocks. And why do you say you feel bad saying that Navarro 150? There's nothing bad about that.
Oh, I'm bad about only doing a quarter point each way rather than. But I do, as I say, because she plays later today, I don't want the situation where I've lost a point before you know the day's out.
It still wouldn't be the worst handicapping we've had on this channel, mate. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We'll be okay with that. But so we've got 3 picks at very different odds there, and all with the same kind of momentum and same kind of feeling about them. That, you know, we want to oppose the top 4. We think that the challenge of these 2 tournaments coming quick and fast makes the top 4 vulnerable. You know, they are the class horses, they are the best players in the world, but to have 2 competitive tournaments back to back is a big ask. And we like 4 people here, 3 players here at a very big price. Helena Ostapenko at 22 to 1 in the top half of the draw. That's a 1 unit each way pick, Rory.
Yes, it is.
We're going to go for Leylah Fernandez at 50 to 1, a half a unit each way in that bottom half. And finally, Emma Navarro, the American, a quarter point each way at 150 to 1 for the tournament in Dubai. Roy, thank you very much for getting me up nice and early. I appreciate that.
That's all right. You've held up quite well, I think. You've done well.
You know what? I'm absolutely shattered. I literally woke. I didn't set the alarm clock. I woke up. I thought, oh, it's 10 to 8. So I thought, oh no, I've got 10 minutes. I've got to quickly get rid of. I had no draw preps or nothing, so I had to quickly get ready. But thanks very much. Have a great weekend, and everybody else watching, have a great weekend. Remember, the tournament does start. It's starting now. So this is we're recording this on Sunday. The tournament started a day early on Sunday. Check the Bet Rivers website out. They've got 29 different markets available on all the first round matches, and you'll be able to get some first round picks throughout the week on our Betting Weekly WTA angles, which we posted on Twitter and across our socials. Remember to download this podcast, Betting Weekly WTA. Subscribe to Betting Weekly Studios on YouTube. Thank you very much for all the new subscribers on there. You're coming in thick and fast every day. I log on and there's a new dozen or 20 odd people coming on and joining the network. So thank you very much for joining us there. Any questions you may have for me, myself, Rory, or any of our handicappers, please put them in the comments bottom below and we'll get them answered. And finally, follow us on our socials at becausewewin, which is the same handle on our Twitter account and our Instagram account. Our Instagram account has a lot of offers. Win a t-shirt, lots of special things are going on. Of course, there are lots of different
hedging is for gardeners, Nigel. I like that t-shirt. Oh, he's wearing it. There we go.
There it is.
I didn't know that. That wasn't scripted, honestly.
It was the first thing I could find out when I got out of bed. I just see it. I'll quickly put that on. It was the first thing I could find. So I quickly come out. Hedging is for gardeners, one of the t-shirts, lots of other t-shirts as well, lots of competitions on the Instagram as well, and also lots of exclusive content. There's some soccer coming thick and fast. The American football may be over, but the Champions League is back. Some big matches next week. We've got you all covered on the Betting Weekly Studios on YouTube as well. Roy, thank you very much again. As always, have a great day. Good luck with your bets this week, and we're going for it. We're going for it. We're going to go for some big prices. We think that Fab Four are vulnerable at the top end of the market, and we've got 3 nice price alternatives to keep us going throughout the week. Well, hopefully one of them lasts the afternoon. Take care, and we'll see you all again next week. Take care.